Thank you for joining us today for another episode of In the Studio. We're in the studio with us. We have Dean Parkin, who's here. He's the Yes Campaign Director, and he's here today to talk a bit about it. And you're traveling all over Australia, isn't that right? Like, just to help promote the Yes vote itself.
Yeah, absolutely, Kalem. It's about getting around to the country, getting to communities across the country, sharing information about what the referendum's about. We're all going to be asked to vote on the 14th of October on a very simple question about recognising Indigenous peoples as the first peoples of this country and doing that through a voice to Parliament. And so the campaign is about sharing information, and obviously we're trying to persuade people to vote yes. We want a yes result on the 14th.
So before we go into the specifics, give us a bit of an example of why this is important.
Well, one of the big issues that has been raised with me throughout all of the times getting around, particularly around Northern Australia and remote parts of the country. You're hearing Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people talk about the lack of safe, clean drinking water in their communities and the multiple impacts that then has on their well-being. Obviously, just having safe access to drinking water is what most Australians in 2023 take for granted. And yet for many of our people out there in those remote communities, that's just not happening, and it affects all other things like health. It affects dialysis, it affects housing, it just has all these knock-on effects. So we shouldn't be having those problems in this country, and we absolutely need Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people at the table talking to governments, advising governments and parliaments about the best way to fix those issues, because everybody's frustrated with the lack of progress, and we're just saying it's time for a real change, and we want Indigenous peoples to be involved in those real changes.
So the main thing that I've heard is from a lot of people out there that are still on the fence is, how is this different from having our Indigenous Affairs Minister or Minister for Indigenous Australians?
Well, there's two very big differences. Firstly, the voice will be chosen by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So the members of the voice will be Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and they'll be chosen by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. The Minister for Indigenous Affairs, Linda Burney, enormous respect for her and what she's done over many years, and other key members of Parliament, Mullindiri McCarthy and others that we know. They do fantastic work, but they're not chosen by the mob. They're chosen by their electorates. They're chosen by the broader Australian population, and therefore they're not directly accountable to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So that's what the members of the voice will be. They'll be directly accountable to our communities who put them there, and that line of accountability is really important. The other important difference is that this voice will have a constitutional protection. It'll mean that not just this parliament or the next parliament or parliaments in 5 or 10 years' time, there will always be a guarantee that there'll be a voice, a seat at the table for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, and that's what a successful yes vote will achieve.
So going a bit back to the selection of people that will have the voice to Parliament, who gets to decide that? Because that is another issue that has been raised for a lot of people out there, is that they're worried that their people will not be heard because you're going to get a lot of Eastern voices. So a lot of people over in the East, and then people from South Australia, top of Queensland, NT, WA, they're all worried that their representatives, their voices will not be heard.
Yeah, so a couple of things to understand. This is a two-stage process. The first stage is the referendum, the vote to change the Constitution. And that change, we're not voting on a model in that change. We're not voting on a structure. We're not voting on who gets elected or where they come from or how many people. That's not part of the question. The question is, should there be one? Should there be a constitutional guarantee that says we should have a voice now and into the future? That's what we're going to say yes or no to on the 14th of October. After that, that's when there'll be a process to consult with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples around the country to work out exactly what that representative model should look like. One of the things I will say is that there are a set of principles that have already been developed by Indigenous peoples. There will be representation across each of the states and territories. The Torres Strait will have some representation as well. And there's been a really strong push to say that regional and remote areas should have extra representation, because the issues facing regional and remote Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities are really, really serious. And then we've got serious issues in some of the cities too. I'm not sitting here saying we've got mob that are doing it really easy anywhere across the country, but we know that there are particular unique issues facing regional and remote Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, and I think there'll be an appetite to make sure that those mobs are well represented, to make sure that their voices are really clearly heard.
You're traveling around. What is the main thing that you're trying to get people to understand for a part of the vote for yes?
I think there's two things. One, the status quo, what we're experiencing right now, is just not good enough. And in fact, even if you talk to those that are on the no case, they agree with us. We actually all agree that what's happening for far too many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples in this country is not good enough. We know the Closing the Gap targets. There's 19 targets. Only 4 of them are on track. Only 4 of them out of 19 in 2023 after all of that investment and goodwill and good intentions. So we can't just keep doing the same thing that we're doing and expecting a better outcome. So I'd just say that, we've got to do something different, and that this is a really simple idea. We're talking about a committee made up of Indigenous peoples because we know that when you listen, when governments listen, when they really listen, parliaments listen to what Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have to say about their families and communities, they make better laws, we get better outcomes. It's as simple as that. So I'd say to people around the country, this is a very good deal. Most Australians are going to wake up on the 15th of October and their lives won't have changed. But for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, we've created an opportunity to have a voice, a standing voice, because we want to get to the real solutions on those really important issues.
Now, you've been travelling all around Australia. Do you have any things that you've heard from people based on what they feel about the yes vote?
There's 2 really different conversations that are happening. There's the one that's happening, and not First Nations broadcasting. I know there's been a very intelligent and very informed conversation that's been happening here, but in other parts of some of the Australian media, it's been, and some parts of politics in Canberra, it's been a very divisive conversation. People have tried to use politics to talk about everything else other than what the vote is, trying to really, turn this into a political football, really, and that's been one conversation. When you get into community, we were out today in Darwin CBD at a sausage sizzle talking to people out on the street about what this is about. When you go on the door knocking, when you're handing out flyers at train stations, when you're actually just talking to Australians, there's a great deal of goodwill and generosity. That's what gives us a lot of confidence that we'll achieve success here, is that when you actually have that straight up yarn with people, they turn around and go, yeah, no, that sounds about right. That sounds about something that we can do as a country. So that's why we're really encouraged by what we're seeing and hearing.
Wonderful. I think that is also another thing. There's quite a few people out in communities who have no idea this is going on. And how are you addressing that?
Oh, we're having conversations just like this one that's helping get that message out there through radio. We've got organisers in every single state and territory across the country. We've got a Northern Territory coordinator here. I just seen some footage of door knocking happening out at Maningrida. We've got community events. We've got opportunities for people to get involved across the country. I've just been in Perth talking to local Aboriginal community organisations down there. Take me out to the outer suburbs and talk to what is actually happening out there on the ground. So we're down in Tasmania just before that, and in Adelaide. So look, we're going to leave no stone unturned. This is far too important. We're getting out to all the communities, and just to say to our mob, even if you're sitting there on the fence and going, well, we're not really sure, let's give this a shot. Voting no gives us exactly what we've got right now, and that's just not good enough. Let's give this a shot. Even if you're not totally happy about it, let's just say yes. Let's get it over the line so that we can give a voice to our people and then build from there.
How has it been being the campaign director for yourself?
Oh, man, it's a tremendous privilege. I mean, I get to every single day go out there and talk to both our mob and non-Indigenous people about what this is about. And every time I get out on the ground and I meet a volunteer, I see somebody wearing the Yes shirt, or I see a supporter out there, it's a tremendous boost of energy. So it gives me a really interesting perspective on what is important to people, and that's why I'm encouraged that we're going to get a yes vote. It's going to be tough work. I don't get to spend a lot of time at home. It's one of those things, but we know it's for a short period of time. What's at stake here means it's worth it. I'm really strongly supported by my own family and by that makes it a bit easier for me. But I wouldn't be anywhere else.
There you go. Well, is there any final things you'd like to say while we have you in the studio?
I'd just say to people out there that are thinking, if you're undecided, if you're sitting there still going, I'm really not sure, understand that there are a lot of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that really, really want this, that we really want to be part of a change. We don't want to just keep things going the same way that they are. We want to be part of a real change that impacts our families and communities. And if you're sitting there going, well, I don't really care all that much, then just give your vote to yes. Give your vote to yes and give us a chance. Give us a chance at doing something different, at doing something better. Because giving us a no vote leaves us exactly where we are, and we all agree that's not good enough. So let's just get this yes vote over the line and be part of a really unifying moment for the country.
I think one of the things that I've heard from people is that there is nothing to lose voting yes. You gain nothing from voting no, but you lose nothing from voting yes.
Exactly right. It's all upside.
Yeah,
it's upside. And as I say, non-Indigenous people can get in behind and support, and they're going to wake up on the 15th, and they're probably going to go to their local sporting event or their local community event or go to the barbecue, and life's going to continue. But by voting yes, they'll have given us an opportunity to really lay those foundations for a real change by making sure we've got a standing voice for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, and it gives us a chance at better policy, a better use of taxpayer spend, better investment. That's what we all want to see. So let's just get behind and vote yes. Let's be part of a unifying moment here.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for joining us today, Dean. And where are you heading off next?
Well, after saying all of that, I'm actually going to get a couple of nights at home. I'm going to head home for a couple of nights, and I don't think I'll be at home then until the actual vote on the 14th of October. So I'll have one last recharge and then go from there.
Too easy. Well, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Kalem.
Wish you all the best in wherever you're heading off to.
Yeah, thanks a lot, bud.
That was Dean Parkin, the Yes Campaign Director for the Yes Campaign. The voting is open on the 14th of October. This is an incredible thing for the referendum itself. Thank you for joining us. This is First Nations Radio and First Nations TV.